Hello guys, it's Teenage Marvel Fan back in the video, and the first official trailer for Morbius has released, and I'm a little late to making this video because this trailer released while I was in school, but lucky for me, I had a study hall and I didn't have any work to do, so I just watched it during school, but I wasn't able to film the breakdown until now. So this is my breakdown for the trailer. I'm gonna start off by just watching the trailer one more time, just to get familiar with it one more time, and then we're gonna go through a shot by shot of each shot of the trailer so we can go over everything that we found out about this movie. So without further ado, let's get started and watch the trailer one more time.
Michael, I've known you since you were a child. You're a gift. You always have. If there's an answer to your disease, you'll find it.
I should have died years ago. Why am I still here if not to fix this? I have a rare blood disease, and I'm running out of time. This could be my last chance.
You're up to something. What is it?
It's not exactly legal.
I don't want to see you get hurt more than you already have.
This would be a cure.
At what cost? Michael, what's happening?
I went from dying to feeling more alive than ever. Increased strength and speed. The ability to use echolocation. And an overpowering urge to consume blood. How far are we allowed to go to fix something that's broken? Until the remedy is worse than the disease.
Michael Morbius. Got tired of doing the whole good guy thing, huh? What's up, Doc?
Alright, now that we've taken one more look at the trailer, I'm going to do a shot by shot by taking a look at over 85 high-res screenshots from the trailer. So I'm just gonna break them down to see what's going on, and especially that big reveal at the end of the trailer, and all the biggest moments from this trailer, including the character's origin, some hints about where the story is going, and so much more. So let's get started. This is our first image. So of course we know that the movie is going to explore, of course, Morbius's origins, and that includes his childhood and, him going to school. At least I believe this is a school. I mean, it looks like a school. And there are going to be some changes to the source material. Like if you read the comics, like this movie and Michael Morbius's origin is going to be different, because it appears as if he was born and raised in Greece. So that's something. But another big difference is that instead of only having a rare blood disease, the young Michael Morbius also has a disability which affects the way he walks. So that's why he has the crutches type things. I don't know if those are actually crutches. So let me know down in the comments below if those are not crutches. I don't really know. But that leads to him being bullied, of course. But he clearly has an ally in Jared Harris's unnamed character, and he'll serve as a mentor to Michael from his childhood right through to his older years. And it's clearly Harris's character who inspires Michael to become a doctor, and it looks like he also treats his affliction along with a number of other very sick children. So I think giving Morbius a physical disability doesn't seem entirely necessary, but perhaps it's a little more realistic compared to the comics, where he already looked vampiric because of his blood disorder long before he became the living vampire. Now, Michael is obviously extremely intelligent, and it's good to see that Sony is respecting that rather than transforming Morbius into a generic action hero type character. But some of Morbius was shot in the United Kingdom, so it's possible that that's where Michael grew up and where he ended up meeting his mentor and lifelong friend. But as we jump into Michael's adult years, we see that he's become an extremely successful doctor and the recipient of the Nobel Prize for his work in the fields of physiology and medicine. Now, unfortunately, his physical condition clearly hasn't improved, and while he doesn't look like a full-blown vampire, we see that his condition has resulted in a somewhat spooky appearance. So it's also worth noting that, like Eddie Brock, Michael Morbius is someone known to the public, and it will be interesting seeing whether the factors into his eventual transformation. But regardless of whether Michael grows up in England, he eventually moves to New York City, and that's going to put him in the same city as a certain superhero. Spider-Man. And also possibly the Avengers. So, Avengers Tower no longer boasts the team's logo, but don't be surprised if the fictional building doesn't make its way into this movie skyline, as it likely won't be that tied into the MCU. So, Michael seems to be a man on the edge as he attempts to cure the condition that seems to be killing him and stopping him from being the doctor he wants to be. Now, despite what we see later on in the trailer, Michael is clearly a good man, and he's looking to do the right thing, and just like he was helped as a child, he now appears to be paying that forward. But poor Michael looks to be in a really bad condition here, as his condition worsens, and so it's no wonder that he later goes to such extreme measures in order to try and save his life. Now, clearly, Michael is an expert in all things blood, but would he use these kids as guinea pigs? I mean, I think that would be kind of messed up, but this kind of looks like that's what he's doing right now. And that would certainly put a dark spin on these early scenes, but it seems somewhat unlikely unless Sony plans to make him a full-blown villain. But I kind of doubt that, because they turned Venom into a hero, and Venom was one of Spider-Man's greatest villains, but now he's a hero, so okay. Now this shot just reminds me of Joker. Now, I still haven't seen Joker, but this reminds me of part of the trailer where it shows him, he's really skinny and he looks like he hasn't been eating, and but as you no doubt know, Jared Leto played the Clown Prince of Crime in the DCEU before joining the Sony universe of Marvel characters, or whatever they're calling this universe thing. But with his blood condition taking hold and making him increasingly sicker, Morbius is clearly getting desperate, and it's not hard to see why based on this shot. I mean, just look at him. He's in pain. You can almost feel the pain. But it looks like he's been experimenting on bats for a while, and that does indeed line up with the comics, where he used vampire bat DNA to try and cure himself, but obviously it didn't work. Well, it did work, but, you know, he turned into a vampire. But interestingly, he also used electroshock therapy in those, but that was a rather new concept at the time and probably wouldn't make sense in a movie that's set in 2020. Now, it is possible that Morbius has been using the bat DNA to keep himself alive, because he certainly appears to be in different stages of declining health during these early scenes, but it is hard to say for sure. Either way, he clearly decides that more needs to be done, and it's at this point in the trailer we slightly veer off from the comics, and things start to get a little weird. And by a little weird, I mean a lot weird, because things are getting weird. So, now, the visuals in this movie don't appear to be overly impressive, but it definitely has a cool look to it. I mean, just shots like this with the helicopter, it's very unique and different from what we saw with Venom back in 2018. But as you can see, alongside his team, Michael is arriving in this mysterious location in a bid to cure himself once and for all, and it looks like he's tracked some rare type of bat based on what comes next. And none of this happened in the comic books, but Sony might have just wanted to make his origin story, you know, a little more exciting than him just sitting in a lab for most of the movie's first act. Now, we don't know whether these bats are supposed to be like, you know, mystical voodoo bats in nature, but it certainly seems possible, and that's quite a departure from how much more scientific things were in the comics. And we're not entirely sure what this weird-looking device is supposed to be, but it does look like it's used to get those bats out of their cave. Maybe he ends up playing that theme on it, given the way it recurs throughout the trailer. But then we have Adria Arjona. Probably didn't say that right, but oh well. But she's playing Mateen Bancroft, who in the comics is Michael's fiance. Now, there's no indication that they're actually romantically involved in this movie, but of course we can't say for sure based on what's shown in the trailer. Now, as you can see here, definitely feels like Michael may not be in his right mind at this point, and, you know, going a little cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. But he brings out this sword thing and goes to some very weird and desperate measures to come up with a cure. And Jared Leto definitely looks better suited for this role than he was the Joker. I don't think you could have gotten anybody better to play Morbius. Like, he just looks like Morbius. And his version of the iconic Batman villain was mostly rejected by fans, more because of the appearance rather than his actual performance. Like, I think his performance was pretty good. It was just the way that the character was written and stuff like that. But anyway, so Morbius, he's like, oh, I'm gonna slice open my hand. So he steps forward and decides to let one of the creatures feed on his blood, presumably because he believes they have some sort of magical healing ability. And as I said, this is where things get strange. And, like, stranger than Doctor Strange. Because this isn't quite as realistic as him experimenting with DNA in a lab, and seems to indicate that vampire bats can indeed pass on their abilities. Now, chances are that Michael doesn't know he will become a vampire by performing this experiment, because if he does, you know, that takes away a big part of the character's tragic backstory. Like, he doesn't want to be a vampire. Like, he never planned to become a bloodthirsty creature, but it is possible that he wants to give himself superpowers and to become something more after being held back physically his entire life. And we've already seen what looked like a visual nod to Joker. Now the movie delivers a scene which looks like it could have very easily come out of Batman Begins. You know, bats, because Batman, bats, yeah. And while everyone else flees from the onslaught of bats coming out of this cave, Morbius just stands there like, hey, these are my friends. So he just made a bunch of friends with these bats, so good for him. Probably didn't have any friends before that, so now he has like thousands of friends now. But then, like I said, one of the bats decided to take the bait and feed on his blood. It just attaches to his hand and then starts sucking his blood, and it's disgusting, but cool. So there has to be more to his origin story, though, than him deciding that a rare form of vampire bat will somehow transfer its abilities to him and cure his condition. But based on how Venom handled Eddie Brock, it's honestly hard to say for sure. I mean, Morbius is pretty cuckoo, so it wouldn't surprise me if that's his whole plan. He's like, I'm gonna get this vampire to suck my blood, and it's a magic bat, so I'm gonna be all magic vampire dude. And it's all a bit silly, of course, but Sony clearly wanted to lean into the horror elements here, so associating Morbius with a slightly more mystical background to explain his vampiric abilities does kind of make sense. And just like Eddie Brock, it seems as if we can expect Michael to undergo quite a transformation when he gets his powers. Now, one difference I am hoping for between Morbius and Venom is that one of the bats does not call him a pussy, because Venom called Eddie Brock that, and that was mean. We don't want the bats to be mean to Morbius. I mean, everybody else is mean to him. Now, here we have this character again, and, she's standing there. She's looking at something. She looks kind of scared. But after returning home, Michael's transformation, of course, you can see his transformation is beginning, and it looks like he struggles to come to terms with his new status quo despite regaining the use of his legs. Then, suddenly, Michael appears to have gained strength no normal man has, and if he does one day come to blows with Spider-Man, they may end up being on something of an equal footing, because, he seems pretty powerful here. Now, how he winds up in this containment chamber, it's hard to say, but it looks like Martine may have been the one who decided to lock him away, unless there's someone else pulling the strings here, because that's always possible. Now, is she glad that Morbius is locked up, or sad that her co-worker and, possible love interest has turned into a monster? Kind of hard to tell. But oh well. Now, once again, Sony is reminding us that Morbius takes place in New York, where Spider-Man and the Avengers live, so they just want to shove that down our throats. And here we can see Morbius standing in some kind of containment cell, maybe, or just a room with glass walls, I guess. And there's a whole bunch of bats in there, and they look creepy because they're all flying around him. And if Morbius has been experimenting on these bats, it does seem a leap to assume that he has to contain them in something. So maybe this is the containment thing for the bats, and then he just walks in there, and then he's like, I shall become one with the bats. That's honestly probably what's going on. And he feels like he has a connection to them, probably. Now, as with most trailers, it's hard to figure out where each scene is supposed to fit into the movie itself, but Michael's experiments on himself are clearly going to be a huge part of the proceedings. And at this point, Michael is in seriously bad shape and appears to be dying. Could it be that after he was cured, his body has started to return to its old self, and possibly even getting worse because he's lacking a certain something, I don't know, maybe not. But that something is blood, and fans of the comics know that the downside to Morbius curing himself is an insustainable desire for human blood, just like an actual vampire. And just one thing I'd like to point out is, like, if you look at him right here, he looks really skinny, looks like he hasn't eaten, looks like he's starving, he looks really unhealthy. But then you go here and boom, that's quite the transformation. Like, I want to look like that. I want a six-pack. I mean, I totally already have one. Wink, wink. But as you can see, Jared Leto definitely got into shape for this role, and he looks vastly different to what he looked like before. But as with any origin story, we'll see Morbius come to grips with his newfound superpowers, figure out what's going on. So he starts lifting this massive tomb in his office. I'm starting to think this dude has an obsession with vampires. I don't know, just a guess, but yeah. Now, when you see the thing, it becomes easier to understand why Sony wanted to give Michael a physical disability as well, because it gives him an even greater drive to cure himself and makes the before and after that much more different. And whether Michael's powers come as a surprise or something he hoped for remains to be seen, but he certainly seems to be embracing them in a big way as he tests them out here. And I really love these next few shots because visually this looks amazing. But this part, I don't really know what's going on here, but I'm thinking that it's probably meant to just show us what Morbius is seeing now that he's gained the powers of echolocation and, other abilities that bats have. Now here's a part I really like. So as you can see, he's leaping through this building, and we get some awesome imagery. And this sequence definitely reminds me of Nightcrawler, except it's like purple energy, and that just looks really cool visually. And this feels very much like comic book imagery. And if there's a lot of this in Morbius, then that would definitely help out this movie a lot. I mean, this already looks like an amazing movie, but that would make it even cooler if we get this all throughout the movie. And then this is our first glance at the authorities, and it seems like Morbius will end up doing something which puts him on their radar, like sucking people's blood will probably do the trick, and seems like he's going to do that, because if you take a closer look at his eyes, he going cuckoo. And then even look at his ears, you'll notice that they've undergone a bat-like transformation to reflect his newfound abilities. Now, is it necessary for that to happen in the movie? No, but Sony wanted to put in a little bit of extra work there to make it look cooler, and they did. But using the power of echolocation, Morbius is clearly embracing his newfound status quo and could be heading down a darker path in the process. And the way Morbius's powers are portrayed during this montage is definitely cool, and it should be fun seeing how that's used if and when he meets characters like Spider-Man and Venom, which would be awesome. But he does meet some other related character later in the trailer, which you kind of already saw. But now this, unless this is like a huge misdirect, it kind of looks like Morbius will end up deciding to use a cargo ship to continue his experiments, possibly after he's been chased out of New York City or something. And then these men come for him, though they don't look like police, so maybe they've been sent by another sinister force who's yet to be introduced, which I'll get into in a little bit. And it's at the point where Morbius will seemingly get to completely lose control as he makes these men his victims and starts tearing through them one by one after they tracked him down to his secret lab. So here's a little advice. If there's a creepy dude and he's hiding from people, and he's been known to, suck people's blood, don't bother him. That's just a disaster waiting to happen. And if you look closely, you'll notice that Morbius's hand have become claw-like, and an argument could be made that he's actually tracked them to the ship. Maybe they kidnapped Martine, possibly. That may be why he's tracking them or following them or whatever. And whatever the case may be in that respect, there's a lot of great horror imagery here as he uses his powers to stalk them and leaps down on this poor sap. You know, probably for an easy meal because he's a little thirsty. And this guy definitely doesn't stand a chance as Morbius leaps through the air, avoiding gunfire and then taking him down with his fangs, bared just like a classic horror movie vampire. I think this is just great. And he's clearly faster and stronger than many heroes and villains out there, and as I previously mentioned, that may wind up putting him on an equal footing with Spidey and Venom. Now, here we see him busting out of captivity, and you'll notice that near Morbius's feet is Martine, and something tells us that he's actually been taken prisoner aboard the ship rather than setting up his own lab. Then this, you can see that he's wearing a prison jumpsuit, and it looks like Michael is either broke into prison or for reasons unknown or recently managed to escape. But either way, it's obviously hard to ignore a certain someone making a cameo appearance here. So yes, that is indeed Spider-Man in the background there. Well, I think the funny thing about this is that not only is this a photo of Sam Raimi's Tobey Maguire Spider-Man suit, but it's a picture from the PS4 game. I just find that hilarious. So Sony can't use Tom Holland's suit in this movie, so that's why they had to do that. But you'd think they'd at least get, like, you know, a picture not from a video game and not from, you know, one of their other movies, because that could make things confusing. But something else that you can note here is that it says murderer on it, and of course that ties into Spider-Man Far From Home, because he's being framed for Mysterio's death, but he's probably not dead anyway. And then you get Agent Simon Stroud, and on the left there, and apparently he has robotic enhancements on his arm. I mean, is this dude cyborg? I mean, wrong universe, but whatever. And we have no clue, because that's not anything from the comics. But this dude, this is who I think the movie's true villain will be. Loxius Crown, and he's a man who suffers from the same blood condition in the comics. But he doesn't look ill, but might just want Morbius's powers for himself, maybe. That's always possible. And going back to that Spider-Man cameo, it's definitely strange that Sony would use a screenshot from the Heroes video game, but perhaps they want us to see it as an artist's interpretation of the web slinger, maybe. But the problem with that is that it's Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, something which has confused many fans and made them think that Morbius is really set in that world. And honestly, I guess that's kind of possible, but I don't know. Because that's definitely possibly the case. But I highly doubt, unless Sony is planning on having Tom Holland play a totally different version of Peter Parker, but that doesn't add up, like, at all. And then we see this classic horror movie sequence as this poor person is running down a hallway. They probably saw Morbius and was like, uh-oh, gotta get out of here. But unfortunately for them, they're not gonna make it, because they're about to get dragged away. And arguably the highlight of this entire trailer is that Morbius finally sports a comic-accurate appearance here. But will this be a permanent fixture, or will he be able to revert to his human self at will? I'm assuming it will be similar to the Hulk, where he can transform back and forth and stuff like that. But at the same time, I hope that he does stay like this, because it's a big part of the character's journey moving forward as he attempts to undo what he did to himself when he cured that rare blood disease thing. But then take a look at this. Honestly, this is a really cool title card. I really like that color, the shade of blue. That looks really nice. And, you know, at this point you're like, alright, that was an awesome trailer, but it gets better. So here's where things get really mind-blowing, because if Michael did indeed spend some time behind bars, it looks like he may have become acquainted with a familiar face from Spider-Man's past. And yes, that is indeed Michael Keaton's Adrian Toomes, a character we saw take on the Vulture persona in Spider-Man Homecoming, where he was last seen being confronted by Matt Gargan about the web-slinger's secret identity. And that's common knowledge now, of course, but is Adrian being moved to another prison, breaking out, or just randomly bumping into Morbius after escaping? And, of course, he is wearing the same prison outfit that he was wearing in that post-credit scene for Homecoming. So I'm not sure what's going on here, because he's meeting up with Morbius here for some reason. Is this a possible setup for the Sinister Six? Does this mean that Morbius might be in the Sinister Six? Honestly, I think that would be really cool, but I don't know. And does this make Morbius in the MCU? That's possible. So this is an awesome trailer. I expected it to be better than I thought it would be. Like, we hadn't seen anything from this movie before. So if you asked me about this weeks ago, I would be like, yeah, I'm not expecting much. But like yesterday, I was like, you know what? I'm expecting this to be really good. Like the New Mutants trailer I just watched. I probably won't do a breakdown for that because I don't have time. But didn't really expect much out of that. But I think that's amazing. So this, I was like, all right, I'll expect a lot out of this and see what happens. And then it exceeded my expectations, especially with that Vulture cameo at the end. Still have no idea what that means. So let me know down in the comments below, did you enjoy this trailer? Are you looking forward to Morbius? And what do you think about that Vulture cameo? Does this mean that Morbius is in the MCU? I have a feeling it's going to be similar to how Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Netflix shows work with the MCU. It's like they can reference the MCU, but the MCU will never reference them, or something like that. So like I said, let me know down in the comments below. But thank you so much for watching. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And I hope to see you in my next video, so I can bestow all Marvel knowledge upon you.